Hi, and welcome to Venture Voices, powered by Xander. Xander is an executive search firm located in New York and in London, and we work with early stage technology companies that are between seed to Series D, helping them scale up with finance leaders. Today, we're joined by Jaja from 25 Madison. Jaja, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. And so before we dive into 25 Madison and your philosophy and focus, it'd be great to get a quick kind of introduction from yourself, Georgia, in terms of who you are, what you've done in the past, and what currently you do at 25 Madison, if that's okay.
Yeah, my background is that I studied molecular biology at Yale, and after graduation, I went to Google. I was a business analyst on the AdMob and AdX products. And after Google, I wanted to make a change. I wanted to go somewhere smaller. So I went to Clover Health. At the time, it was a startup before it went public. Was there on the growth strategy team. And after Clover, I joined Headline for a few years on the early stage investment team. And after that, in 2022, I joined the team at 25 Madison. And essentially at the time, we were just a studio. That's when we added our fund was in 2022. And now I've been here for almost 3 years. I lead our fund investing practice here, which is on the pre-seed and seed side of things, and we'll get into it later on.
Awesome. Wow, what background from big corporate to smaller company operator to now investor. So you've seen many walks of life already in that career span. So quite impressive. And so going back to, I suppose, 25 Madison, talk me through Jaja 25 Madison's story and kind of how it was set up. You obviously joined, almost kind of 3 years ago now. I know they've been around since 2018. So yeah, give us a bit of a background on how you came about 25 Madison.
Yeah, so I was introduced to 25 Madison via one of our venture partners. And the origin story behind us is that we were founded by our CEO, Stephen Price, in 2019. He is a serial entrepreneur. And essentially, we started a studio incubating companies from the ground up. And over time, we realized that we wanted to raise a fund vehicle for two reasons. Number one, we wanted to double down on the winners that we incubated via the studio. And number two, we also wanted to just invest in that new companies that we're seeing on the market that we like, that we didn't incubate. So that was in 2022. That's when I joined. And essentially, we now run both a studio and the fund. I'm obviously only on the fund side of things, but I still work with my colleagues on the studio investment team as well. And one last thing to note is that Apollo Global Management is our largest LP.
Yeah, awesome. And in terms of 25 Madison's kind of partnership with PE funds, Georgia, how does that influence its kind of investment theses specifically and the sectors of startups it chooses to incubate or invest in? As I know that's one of the key parts to 25 Madison's strategy.
Yeah. So the way that we work with Apollo is that it's more than just an LP. It's actually a really key strategic partner that we have. And essentially, we are only investing right now in sectors where we think that we can help our companies go to market via Apollo. So as a result, right now, we're only investing in B2B SaaS across supply chain slash commerce, healthcare, and regulated industries where we can apply AI. And this, by no coincidence, also mirrors the sectors where Apollo is very actively investing, and also our other PE partners as well. And we chose to really laser focus on these sectors because otherwise, what are we doing here, right? As VCs, like our whole thesis is essentially to help our companies go to market via Apollo and our other PE partners.
Yeah, and yeah, B2B SaaS is obviously a big play for a lot of VCs, and that focus has definitely been on the agenda, especially in the last 18 months, with investors focusing in on that kind of return of investment, and seeing, a bigger kind of return with B2B SaaS companies. I suppose within, you mentioned a number of different categories, health, supply chain, and a few others. Is there a particular silo that is doing better than others right now within B2B SaaS? And how do you see that evolving, Jojo?
Yeah, I would say that within our own portfolio, we're seeing a lot of activity in companies that are targeting really unsexy, quote unquote, industries that are pretty overlooked. People don't think much about. For example, we have one that we incubated and invested in recently called Rebuild, is in the disaster recovery space. At a glance, it seems like it's a really small market, but it's actually not. And we think that it's a kind of market where you can't apply a lot of the existing more generic or horizontal AI products to the space because of specific workflows that they have. And it's a space where it's pretty overlooked relative to the rest of the construction industry. And we think there's a big opportunity there to build niche and expand beyond.
And how do you add value ultimately to your portfolio companies? Obviously, there's a lot of VCs out there. They each have their differentiators. There's also a lot of kind of common ground amongst, obviously, a lot of the VCs as well.
Yeah.
Is there a particular, do you do things better than others, would you say? Or, is there a certain differentiator as to how you bring about value to your portfolio companies?
Yeah. For us, it's all about distribution, and that's the number one thing that we can help you with. We think that our PE partners, like Apollo and other firms around the table, is our largest value add. And so we talk about go-to-market a lot. And essentially what it boils down to is that we want to help our startups find their first enterprise customer via one of these PE portfolios. And we do that day in and day out. We have folks who spend 90, 100% of their time is doing it. And so it's a really key part of the 25 Madison experience. And it's one that we're leaning heavily and heavily on more so than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And that PE, I suppose, partnership that you have, let's say, without wanting to sound naive, but is that a very much so a unique partnership that you have versus a lot of the VCs? I mean, we've interviewed a lot of VCs and we work with a bunch. I can't think of any that have that stronger relationship with a kind of PE partner as such. So is that, would you say, a kind of a key differentiator? And is there anyone else out there doing that?
Yeah, I would say there are definitely folks out there who have like relationships where it's a VC fund that was formed out of a P fund. They operate underneath distinct brand names, for example. And but they usually like act, I would say, pretty independently and
Mm,
they don't have much to do with the P firm that they spun out of. There are a few, like probably less than five out there that have this kind of model.
mm,
I think that what makes us different is that we work with a number of PE firms, and especially on the studio side of things, my studio investment team is working like oftentimes like day in day out with these PE portfolio companies and figuring out what are the pain points that they're facing. Is there a product that we can incubate around these certain pain points? And so we really use them as design partners very actively, as opposed to just like we spun out of this PE fund and that's that.
yeah, it's a great way to, I suppose, get some ideas going, right, which are
Yeah,
relevant to the market.
yeah,
So great intel, generally speaking, in partnering with the firms. And obviously for the startups and the founders that you have in your venture studio, they can then be a bit more targeted and hopefully have a lot more success in being able to tap into certain enterprises. So I see the logic in that. And why do you think now is the best time to be targeting kind of PE companies? For startups specifically?
Yeah. I hate to keep on talking about AI over and over again, but I think that a lot of these P firms and P portfolio companies, they also care about implementing AI. They aren't often at the forefront of implementing or using AI as much as like we are on the VC and tech side of things, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested, right? They just like
Mm,
don't know where to start many times. And so they care about it, especially from an efficiency standpoint, because I hate to be like, super stereotypical, but efficiency is very key, obviously, to a lot of these kinds of companies. And so it's actually AI is a really great uh, feature and product for these kinds of PE-backed companies to implement. And so now is the time because if you're a startup, you're a seed, Series A stage startup, you want to land your first enterprise customer. I think a
mm,
lot of people want to go to the shiny, big enterprises that we all think of, like a PayPal or Intuit or something, right? Which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of people are pitching those types of corporates, and so we think that by helping our companies land one of these P-backed companies that no one else is pitching, we think that our companies have a much better and faster shot.
mhm. And which way does it work, Georgia? Is it a case of the PE companies come to you knowing they need to adopt AI in a particular part of their business, or do you come up with a potential solution to make things efficient for these companies, and then the companies start thinking about how they can adopt AI, or is it a bit of both? Would you say?
Yeah, I would think it's a bit of both. Oftentimes, our team, we will go and meet with a lot of execs at one particular company, and it's really hard for people to just come to the table and say, this is what is frustrating about my job. Here are like the top 5 things. Oftentimes, it's more of an interview like process where they walk us through their day-to-day workflows, who's on their team, what products they're using. And it's during this interview process that they can then start to articulate, oh, yeah, this specific XYZ thing that I do every week or every day is extremely frustrating. Like I would pay money for someone to offload this specific task or workflow off of me and my team. So you start to get people to start talking, and then you start to brainstorm with them. Oh, well, how could we solve this problem for you? Would it look like X or would it look like Y? How do you think about it fitting into the rest of your overall workflow? So it starts off being more like an interview process, and over time it becomes a longer conversation, and that's how we eventually get them as nice design partners.
And I would imagine there's not much resistance when it comes to AI, or is there? And if there is, how do you tend to counter that? Because yeah, when we did a roundtable a couple of weeks ago with operators from startups and mid-sized companies, I think generally speaking, there was overwhelming. Yes, we're really encouraged by AI, but it was also a case of, if the company doesn't have a large enough runway or not much forthcoming investment, there's also a withdrawal of investment in stuff like AI. But then again, if you do adopt AI, it can lead to efficiencies, and it can obviously impact the bottom line in a positive way. So, what is the balance, and what are you seeing in terms of resistance to AI, generally speaking?
Yeah, I would say it's not so much about a resistance to AI. It's more about prioritizing where does AI stack in terms of like the 100 priorities that an exec has at one of these companies. And so I think that it's about entering these companies during a time where they're not super super struggling, or like there's 10 things that are going extremely wrong. I think it's really hard to get people's attentions during those kinds of times, but I think that if you enter usually like right post acquisition, um you know a lot of changes are going to be made, and people are starting to think about, okay, what are the next 3, 5 years look like, I think that's a good time to enter and interview folks and figure out if there's a way for us to come in and build something or sell something that might make their lives a lot easier.
Yeah, interesting. So there are certain kind of inflection points that you think as to where the company could really benefit from AI potentially. So yeah, that's a valid point. And going back to, I suppose, 25 Madison. Can you describe, I suppose, the culture at 25 Madison, Jaja, and kind of how it shapes the process for incubating new companies?
Yeah, I would say that the culture is very much so. We're always looking to solve problems. And I think that it comes from not only being a normal venture fund, but we also have a studio component. And so we're always looking for creative ways to solve problems, and it definitely permeates throughout our entire culture. And we specifically love to come across problems that are more like greenfield, they're unsexy, people, um, have overlooked it for whatever reason. Those are the types of problems that we love to solve, and I think that we are always open to being very creative as to, like, what's the best way to solve this product? What it's, like, something that we can try that other folks haven't tried. So there's definitely a lens of creativity that is in our culture.
And there's obviously, I'm sure you see a lot of founders and ideas come to you on a regular basis. A lot of them obviously, follow us as well, and they're very keen to learn of your kind of diligence process, and how therefore they can kind of stand out. Could you just talk us through that, Georgia, in terms of what's kind of your specific kind of diligence process in evaluating startups?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the diligence process on the venture fund side of things. We're missing in pre-seed and seed companies. Usually, sometimes there's a product build, there's a handful of design partners or customers using it. Sometimes there's literally nothing built. It just depends on the company. And what I will say about our diligence process is that I would say it's not like very different from like a normal VC diligence process, besides the fact that we are super, super heavy on talking to folks who are potential users in our network. And I think that it comes back down to us being super laser focused on these specific uh, areas in industrial supply chain, commerce, healthcare, regulated industries. And if we find that it's really difficult to diligence this kind of ICP or buyer, it's 2 things. Number 1, there may or may not be an actual use case for the product that this founder is building, and number 2, it may not be a fit for us because, then that means that we won't be good partners in helping this company go to market in the future post-investments, hypothetically. So, I think that that's why it's a good, like, litmus test for these companies during the diligence process to see like who do we uncover via our network, because we do have a pretty wide network across the team on the P side of things, and so it's a pretty good litmus test so far.
And is there, specifically when it comes to, I suppose, on the founder evaluation, are there particular traits that you look for in a founder? Is there a common trend across, a bunch of the founders that you back as such, uh, or do you kind of judge each on its own merits as such, in terms of what that founder brings to the table relevant to that startup?
Yeah, I think that we're always looking for founders that are super resilient, very driven, ambitious. And I think that between the fun and the studio, what's interesting is that um, we are looking more for teams on the fun side of things, like traditional, like CEO plus a CTO, perhaps, maybe, and then also maybe a third co-founder or fourth. But on the studio side of things, it's more folks who are domain expertise and whatever X incubation that they're going to be building. We find that those kinds of profiles do better, especially on the go-to-market and sales side of things. And um, we're not so much looking for like perfectly like formed out teams because the whole point of the studio is that we will also help you like augment the rest of your team as well. So it's a little bit different profile between the fund and the studio.
Yeah, great. And you know, what's been really a topic of discussion, as I'm sure you're aware of in recent kind of times, is diversity across, you know, that founder population and startups per se, in the sense of, you know, there's the backing of all female founded companies is very low, and you know, obviously when it comes to ethnicity as well, it's still very low in terms of investment in that space as well. What are your thoughts on how that kind of paradigm is shifting, Jaja, when it comes to diversity, and you know, is it improving? Do you think it's still a challenge? Does more need to be done at that kind of grassroots level to encourage those from a diverse background to enter the world of startup? I appreciate there's multiple questions there, but it'd be great to get your kind of take on that as well.
Yeah, so I definitely think that things have been getting better. If I look at when I started my career versus today, even, I think that there's been a notable increase in female founders, female VCs, etc. And I think that that's wonderful, and it makes me hopeful for the future. However, I do think that you walk into a room a lot of the times, there aren't a lot of women around sometimes. And so definitely think that there's a lot more work to be done in the tech community. But I would say overall, things have been getting better, but things could also be getting better in general as well. So I'll say that.
Yeah, and once again, there's a lot of founders out there hustling away trying to get VC investment. What really impresses you? Would you say, Georgia, if someone were to pitch to you, you know, who really kind of stands out? What do they need to say ultimately to impress you and kind of 25 Madison?
Yeah, I think that it's all about why why are you the perfect person to start this company today. I think that at the pre-seed and seed stages where I'm investing, that's the number one question as to, you know, why are you the person who is gonna solve this massive issue or spend 7 to 10 years of your life doing it? Why do you think you have the highest chances of success compared to some other person? So, um, I think that's the number one thing that it boils down to. Obviously, there's like 10 other factors probably that I can talk about, but I would say that's number one.
Yeah, and is there a particular example that, without mentioning names, that you could kind of highlight that really did a very good pitch, and you know why that was?
Yeah, I would say that um, I can sometimes just tell from like the first conversation that I have with a founder that this person or this team is really suited to solve this specific problem, and I really want to invest. Pretty much, I know from the first meeting if I want to invest or not. Like it's very obvious to me now that if I'm not excited in the first meeting, I think there's something probably intuitively that I'm sensing that is not going to work out. And so I can pretty much tell from the first meeting, like if I want to invest or not. Um, and I think that the teams that do really good jobs at doing that have a really crisp and concise way of saying, like, this is the problem, and this is how we're going to solve it, and this is why we're the perfect team to solve this problem. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the general kind of startup ecosystem going into 2025? Is there a lot of optimism? Is there a lot of excitement in particular the you know the markets that you operate in, or is there still a bit of holding back of investment, and you know is growth still difficult to come by for startups? Yeah, what's your kind of, I suppose, prediction for 2025?
Yeah, I feel pretty hopeful for 2025, cautiously hopeful, I would say. And I think that it's because we're gonna have a lot more tech IPOs in 2025, and that's gonna have a trickle down effect down to the pre-seed and seed stages. So, personally, I'm pretty hopeful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very in line with what we see as well, obviously being at the forefront of talent and placing talent into these companies. I think a lot of these, startups of a certain stage are now building up for hyper growth, bearing in mind the types of individual that they've brought in, individuals that have got public markets experience, acquisitions experience, and, candidates that have raised X amount through a certain institution. So has been more of a shift, we would say, in the second half of the year in terms of the types of profile that companies have started to hire, which goes in line with your prediction in terms of that growth ambition for next year. So that's really encouraging. And 25 Madison, is it in terms of deployment? Are you in the middle of a fund right now, and what's your kind of journey looking like for, I suppose, the first half of next year at least?
Yeah, we're off to the races in 2025, so please contact me if you're raising for a pre-seed or seed round. And also, if you're interested in incubating, please also contact my colleagues on the studio side of things. We're totally down to chat.
Yeah, and just one more question, Jaja, to leave founder community thinking on this one. If I suppose you were to give advice to a new founder out there, and to think of a particular business that could be really disruptive, is there an idea out there that you would say, look, focus in on that space, or that idea, and that could make you a lot of money? I know you don't want to give away too many secrets of 25 Madison's ideation kind of philosophy, but yeah, any kind of thoughts there in terms of what could be the big disruptor of 2025?
The big disruptor of 2025, I would say that we continue to look a lot in the industrial distributor space right now, and we've spent some time researching the space. These folks are huge parts of the supply chain, like sector in this country, and they're often overlooked by a lot of tech providers. They have a very specific workflow, and they are still pretty important. They're not just like middlemen. They're actually middlemen with very good domain knowledge. And so I don't think that they're going to go away at any time in the near term future. So I think that there's a lot of folks out there in the distributor world who would like to try new tech products. That's my sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's all I found is going off and working on something in the industrial space then. And yeah, just finally, is there obviously founders are always looking to evolve, develop, learn, progress. They do a lot of that through their startups, but is there anything that you would recommend outside of their startup that would really help develop them?
I'll give a shout out to my favorite Substack. How about that?
Sure, sure.
Okay. My friend Noah Smith, his Twitter handle is Noah Opinion. He writes a really fantastic Substack that is not 100% focused on tech, but it's a little geopolitical. He writes about global economies a lot, and I think it's a really fantastic read, really easy to read. He really like simplifies it for folks who like aren't in specific spaces, and I think it's really well done. So people should read it.
Nice plug there. Awesome. Brilliant. Jaja, thank you for coming along and providing us with your insight and expertise. I think the founder community that we serve will really value that. So, yeah, no, thanks. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.